Meanwhile, White House had in fact created another sort of a neo-colonial situation. White House trade advisor Peter Navarro, when referring to tariffs on India, said that 25% tariffs were put in place because India cheats US on trade. Then he went on to say the other 25% is because of Russian oil purchases. Navarro also claimed that the road to peace in Russia-Ukraine war runs through India. In remarks to reporters, the US President's trade counselor, Peter Navarro, said that he doesn't expect Trump to extend the timeline on doubling tariffs on India as penalty for buying Russian oil beyond August 27th, while accusing New Delhi of profiteering from transactions with Moscow.
I see that taking place. India doesn't appear to want to recognize its role in the bloodshed. It simply doesn't. It's cozying up to Xi Jinping. Is what it's doing. It's not act. And by the way, I wrote that article in the FT just to deal with the propaganda of the Indian government to make people want to feel sorry for them. Oh, they need the oil. They don't need the oil. It's a refining profiteering scheme. It's a laundromat for the Kremlin. That's the reality of that. So I love India. Look, Modi's a great leader, but please, India, look at what your role here is in the global economy. Well, let's talk about India. I would refer you to the piece I did in the Financial Times that appeared on Monday. And the Indian situation is very interesting. A lot of people don't know this, but prior to Russia's invasion of Ukraine in February of 22, India India bought virtually no Russian oil. Let me say it again. Prior to the invasion of Ukraine in February 2022, India bought virtually no Russian oil. I mean, it was like 1% of their needs. So the argument somehow now, as the percentage has gone up to like 30 and 35%, that somehow they need Russian oil to cool their homes or cook or drive their cars is nonsense. And what I do in the Financial Times article is I illustrate how Russian refiners have gotten in bed with Italian refiners in a game in which they get cheap Russian crude, follow me here, they get crude at a discount, and then they make refined products which they sell at premium prices into Europe, Africa, and Asia. It's strictly profiteering by the Indian refining industry, big oil. Now think about India when you think about the tariffs we're putting in place. 25% because they cheat us on trade, 25% because of the Russian oil. I ask you this, what is the net impact on the Americans because of our trade with India? Well, let's think about it. They have higher tariffs, there are Maharaja tariffs, higher non-tariff barriers. We run a massive trade deficit with them, so that hurts American workers, hurts American businesses. Then they use the money that they get from us when they sell us stuff to buy Russian oil, which then is processed by refiners, and they make a bunch of money there. But then the Russians use the money to build more arms and kill Ukrainians, and so American taxpayers have to provide more aid, military style, to the Ukrainians. So that's insane. And President Trump sees that chessboard beautifully.
My colleague Karthik Malhotra, in fact, joins us on this. Karthik, America can pursue its interests no matter how. But when it comes to other countries looking for their own interests, the question about morality, the question about funneling a war, the question about trade, tariffs, everything emerges. Is the US now moving into complete protectionism? Have they in fact abandoned the idea of globalization, liberalization, things that they have been in fact talking about, open markets, which they have been talking about for the last almost 3 decades. Is it that the other countries have become better with these aspects than them?
Varghese, no easy answers to that. Of course, this is an argument which has been doing the rounds, and I think it is quite easy to assume at this stage that, yes, the idea of globalization, which was set forth in the world by the US, now seems to be in distant memory, at least of the current US dispensation, the Donald Trump and his administration. So I think that is one part of the equation. But what you're also seeing playing out is some sort of a frustration. There is frustration that India has not yet been able to agree to all the demands by the US when it comes to offsetting those trade tariffs, 25% tariffs that US has imposed on India. Add to that, of course, the secondary tariff threat of 25%, which are to come into effect from the 27th of August. And we had seen after the Alaska summit that Putin and Trump sort of, coming closer together, more bonhomie at display. So there was this notion that perhaps that additional secondary tariff of 25%, because India imports Russian oil, will not be imposed anymore. And now, of course, I think this frustration also playing out because US has not really been able to influence Putin's decision to end the war in Ukraine. So obviously, US is finding a lot of means, a lot of avenues and a lot of targets to put the blame on. And India right now attracting the highest, the biggest level of ire from the US. But again, I think, coming back to the point, the statement that Peter Navarro just made, and we heard that India's import of Russian oil before 2022 was almost nil. He's right. Why was India's oil from Russia almost nothing, or just about a percentage or so of our total oil import? Simply because there was no discount available on Russian oil. India started purchasing and started upping its quota of Russian oil only because that oil was available cheaper in the market. And which country was encouraging India to go ahead and make those purchases? And I think our government has come on record to state that it was the US administration at that time, which said that if India does not buy oil from Russia, then the global oil markets are going to go in a tizzy and oil prices are going to go through the roof. So in a way to stabilize oil prices across the world, it was India's decision to go ahead and protect its own economic interests by discounted Russian oil and not let oil prices soar for the world.
Also, Karthik, here we are talking about also trade, where he says that, India has got Maharaja of tariffs. He was talking about the trade deficit. But I was recently listening to what the Singaporean and, the legislators was also saying, that having a trade deficit is not bad. It just shows that there is a possibility of, having a larger share in it and also ensuring that business keeps going. So it's not bad that you have a trade deficit. But America, whenever it talks about tariffs, let's say with other countries, it's talking about trade deficits that's been there, and that has to be righted at any cost.
You're right. So again, Varghese, I think the point is very simple. Peter Navarro repeating pretty much using a different word, but saying exactly the same thing that Donald Trump had said in the past. Donald Trump has called India the king of tariffs, and here Peter Navarro is calling India the Maharaja of tariffs. So he's just sort of doing a wordplay here, nothing different really when it comes to the mindset of the American administration referring to India and India's tariffs, apart from just that change of word from king to Maharaja, which incidentally means exactly the same thing. But again, I think, the observation that you're stating on the trade deficit, every country wants a trade surplus, but that's not how the world functions. That's not how economies and global trade functions. If you're buying something and if you're selling something, the value of those being exactly the same is seldom going to be possible. So it's a question of what are your competitive advantages? What is it that you are able to offer to the world better than and at a better price than the rest of the world? And that defines your standing in the global trade order. So India's requirements from US are fewer than the requirements of the US economy from India. Hence, US ends up purchasing more from India, and India does not purchase as much from the US in pure monetary value terms, and that leads to a trade deficit. So is trade deficit a bad thing? Definitely not, because at some point, surpluses and balances across multiple regions, multiple blocks, multiple countries will have to balance each other out for trade to happen in the world. Now, if US wants a trade surplus with every trading partner in the world, that's practically not going to be possible for the US.